Hello and welcome to this episode of Al's Garage. We're continuing work on our Pentagon Arctic hardtop for our 1943 Willys MB project. This will be putting a few things together, putting the top on the Jeep and getting the doors installed. So we're going to start by replacing the weather strip seal that goes between the front edge of the top and the cowl on the Jeep. We'll get that done, and then we'll tackle, there's a gun rack that this Jeep had installed, and we're going to install that as well before we actually get this thing put on the Jeep. Let's get started. So the first step in doing this is just removing the old cowl weather strip, and it wasn't hard, it was just tedious. There's a lot of these little screws that hold the weather strip to the top, so it was just a matter of getting in there and working through that and getting those removed. Some of them had paint and, gunk and stuff in the threads, so it was a matter of kind of working it back and forth, making sure I didn't strip out the flathead screwdriver bit on the end and get that done. And next was installing the new weather strip. This actually went really easy. Again, pretty much the reverse process, but now that I've got the threads cleared by pulling those screws, I was able to get this thing in pretty easy. The weather strip for this top is actually the same weather strip that you would put on a standard folding windshield for one of these Willys MBs. I don't know if it was exactly that weather strip when this top was new, but that's what I'm throwing in here. The holes for the weather strip rubber lined up with the holes in this top, so hey, close enough and it'll work and will provide a good seal as this thing's going down the road, so there's no air coming in or water coming in if it's raining. Going through this was a reverse process. Obviously I was making sure to not get them too tight. I had a lock washer on each of these nuts, so once they got tight, it obviously is not going to rattle out and loosen up this weather stripping here. And once I get done with the piece on the end here, I will review the length and probably cut it to fit. And there's the finished weather strip installed on the top. And next is the gun rack, as I mentioned at the top of this video. This thing came with it when I got the Jeep, but I'm sure this was sort of a aftermarket edition. A lot of Jeeps and trucks and stuff came with these, so it was a kind of a 60s aftermarket modification. And the bottom bolts were easy to get, but the top ones I couldn't get my arm around, so I enlisted the help of my wife to be on the other side and help me get those pieces installed to make sure that this was coming in and coming together in a way that we could get those both tight and taken care of. One of the things I did as I pulled this top apart and got it ready for paint was I pulled all the weather stripping off of the inside area where this inside windshield frame is. This frame is the same dimensions and to the best of my knowledge, the type of windshield frame that you would have had for the original Jeep. It looks like they just removed that and put it in this. So what I did is I added the some home like window and door weather stripping, which seemed to be what was in there before. Again, I don't know if that's what it originally had, but this will at least help seal things up a little bit more. I used some tape. It was kind of a warm day and the glue wasn't seeming to stick good, but what I did is I took some blue tape to hold it in there. After about a day of having it shut and holding that glue in place, I opened it up and then it seemed to be just fine. And we're getting ready to put the top on the Jeep now, but before we do that, I took some of the same type of seal, this window and door seal that you might get from a home improvement store, and I put it along the top edge of the tub in order to make sure that the tub and the top one didn't wear through that metal and wear all the paint off of it, and two, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't rattling. There was a nice tight fit, and as you as you drive down the road, it doesn't rattle or anything like that. Alright, time to lift the top. I enlisted 2 friends and my wife to help me on this. We wanted to make sure that it went on nice and smooth, so we had as many people on this as possible. Just me pulling the wheel there to help with the installation, and here we are, delicately installing it, making sure we don't dent or scratch anything. And the installation was a success, just making sure that it's lined up with the tub the way it should be. This top bolts to the front of the cowl via the eye bolts that would go where your straps are. So that was a pretty easy process, just getting behind there and installing those bolts. And the rest of the top installation was easy because there's these bolts that go through the bottom channel of that Arctic top and clamped to the body. There was 6 total, 2 on each face, 2 on the back and 2 on each side. Next up are hanging my doors. It's a very easy process. These are a lot like an interior door. You just line up the hinges and then install the pins. I made sure that there was a little grease on those to make sure that it flowed in pretty smooth. One of the things I took off when I painted this were the door handles, and so it was just a matter of installing those. There's a couple of screws, and then just making sure that it lines up appropriately when it is installed. And from here it's following a similar process as when I did the inner windshield frame. I took the same type of weather stripping that was on there originally, that was this window and door stuff that you get from a big box home improvement place, and then installing that on the edge of the store, again to help with sealing this top up. And again, I was running into a similar issue with this weather stripping, not quite sticking given the glue that was on it, so I used some tape to kind of hold it in place, shut the door, making sure that the shut door was holding that weather stripping in place, so that as the glue kind of sits and dries and holds there, that it'll actually hold this thing in place. Next step was hanging the driver's side door. Same process, just doing it for the other side. Next up, there's straps that hold each of the doors to the top, and I worked to install those because they keep the doors from swinging out too wide, neither hitting the fender or in the driver's side case hitting the mirror. So I took some spare seatbelt material. Every cut I made, obviously I melted it to keep it from getting frayed, and then I used some tape to ensure that I marked it as to how long I wanted each of those straps to be. And then from there, I took some JB Weld and mixed it together, added it in there. I thought that it would be a good heavy-duty glue to put in there. There's obviously a ton of different glues that you could probably have used to fasten these together, but I wanted to use that as sort of a backup when it comes to kind of gluing the seatbelt material together. Now, the seatbelt material I don't think would have 100% lasted just on the glue, so after I went through the process of installing it here, I then took a rivet gun and I put some rivets into the seatbelt material. I had to ream out some holes first, to make sure we got it in there. But that seemed to be how it was installed when I pulled this apart, and then I again went through this, put about 4 of these rivets in, and that seemed to work for it. And that's it. That's the process that I did for installing this top. It wasn't too much, but everything takes time, and this was just one thing that needed to get done. I appreciate you watching. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.